Welcome back, everyone. Uh, we will now open up the Q&A session for today's PsychedelX participant presenters. We have with us, let's see, we have Angel, Cece, Luke, Joel, Lindsay, Megan, in attendance with us today. If you have not already, please accept your panelist uh, invitation so we can have you on our Q&A here. Unfortunately, a few could not show up. David, Andre, or sorry, yes, yes, David, Andre, and Robert. Uh, for those participants, if you have any questions for them, uh, when you type it out in the Q&A, please include your email address and we will send it to them uh, so that they can follow up with you on their own time. Okay, so for our first question, let's see. Cece, how would you ideally want to see ketamine therapists adopting spiritually informed treatment more? What do you wish you had known about this before you begun your ketamine assisted therapy journey?
Yeah. So in terms of what I think would be really cool to incorporate a little bit more would be kind of just like the book that I had, Spiritual Growth, Becoming Your Higher Self. Like that was a book of a lot of different frameworks and kind of meditation techniques and visualization techniques. And I think having those kind of laid out before like therapy sessions or as something that you go through or like I'm trying to think of it. Like, there's a great visualization in it where you imagine, like, when you're really stressed out, when there's a million different things on your mind, you imagine like white light pouring in through your brain into your mind, just kind of almost like a leaf blower blowing away all of the kind of like dark negative energy that's just all the like crazy stuff going on in life just to kind of clear your mind, your body, and soul. And that's something that it's kind of like a spiritual framework, like kind of a spiritual visualization, but it's something that I was able to incorporate with me in the actual therapy sessions when I'd come in and I was just having a lot of different emotions. I was trying to calm down, clear, center myself, but also something that I do now every single time I'm in that kind of state. And I think that's something that would be cool to have, I guess, incorporated alongside therapies like that. And sorry, what was the other part of the question? The second part.
The second part is, what do you wish you had known about this before you began your journey?
Speaking of my journey, okay. Um, I guess let me add one more part to the first part too, that I think would be cool. I think in terms of like those spiritual frameworks and teachings, I think that's maybe something to also think about when you're finding a therapist or a licensed medical professional who can do this type of therapy with you. Like that might be something that's important to talk about and discuss beforehand, like both of your own personal spiritual views and if they align. So personally, when I was doing it, I was with someone who, believed heavily in like Eastern medicine, Eastern cultures, and we were able to incorporate that into the sessions themselves. And I do think it would be a different experience if maybe you had someone who, had a different type of spiritual religious background and maybe just pairing up with a therapist that works best for you like that. Something that I wish I knew. Um, I don't know. I'm glad that I just had that book itself to kind of serve as a framework. I think it was a good place to start. And, now even watching everyone's presentation, I learned more about like Michael Pollan and different, authors who are also focusing on this, psychoactive, psychedelic assisted therapy journey. So maybe just knowing a little bit more about them, like those really big names in the field, and kind of some of their work to maybe read about while you're undergoing the therapies will be helpful too. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So for our next question, I'm going to hand it off to Angel. I would like to know uh, if you could elaborate more on the implications of the soft. It was a soft girl renaissance. Uh, if you could if you could elaborate on the implications and how do you see this envis this taking hold uh, in society in a more broader known manner.
Okay, thank you for the question. Just to make sure that I understand, I think that you're asking overall broadly, how do I see the software renaissance? Um,
Essentially becoming mainstream.
okay.
How do you see that entering into the mainstream?
Yeah, most
What can people do to advance that?
yeah, most definitely. I think the last keynote speaker that we had was really informative on how a vision like this could come to life. So destigmatizing psychedelic use within the Black community, having more people that are involved in this work, understand the strong Black woman schema and understand the risk associated and why possibly BIPOC people don't want to participate. So destigmatizing number one, creating safe spaces and obviously educating the community, I think, would really allow this vision to come to fruition.
All right, thank you. Andrea, do you want to have our next question?
Yes. Um, next question is for Megan. I think she is. Megan is not here, right? No. Let me see. Okay, so next question is for Cece. So, your play is a unique take on the clinical ketamine journey. What sort of reaction did you receive from both the public and individuals in the psychedelic space?
In the psychedelic space, I would say it's very well received. I would say people think it's pretty cool. In that it's just a different way to relay that information. To help people know a little bit about it. Um, and let me get my dog for a second. Okay, there you go. In terms of the public space, I would say a lot of people think it's cool too. I definitely have to, and this is something I worked with like my mentor with, like working around it to talk about it in a certain way that's not just like, yay, like let's do it, and then like sing music about how wonderful it is, because it's a very serious thing, a very serious procedure that like really can only and should only ever be done under a lot of supervision. So there's definitely a way to go about it. And that I found out and talking about it to make sure people, are like, oh, this sounds really cool, but it's also not sounding like let's just do drugs. And then yeah, I guess a lot of people it's something where they just don't know about it. It's not a super well-known therapy yet, especially, if you're maybe not struggling with treatment-resistant depression. So it's been cool to kind of create something where it gets people to talk about something that they didn't even know existed and learn what that is actually like, that experience. So a lot of times it's a lot of just interest in, oh, what is that? So yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Logan, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Megan, since you're here now, a question for you. How do you envision, if at all, the integration of psychedelics into the birthing space, whether that be a journey taken prior to pregnancy, afterward to help in postpartum care, or just generally speaking, what is your thoughts on that? If psychedelics are even appropriate, or rather if the meditation, as you described, is of a more of applicable.
Wow, I love this question. I think my first thought about it is that I really feel that psychedelics are for those that are drawn to it. And so it's not necessary to have those non-ordinary states of consciousness. There are other ways in. This is why I like the connection to birth, because it's a way in where you're not actually even putting a substance in your body. It's just actually what your body does, your physiology. I think that for people who are interested, that there is a place. I think preparation, and especially like with a partner, if you're like consciously gonna start a family with someone like, and everybody's interested, like that could be very powerful. And yeah, wow, I mean, meditation is really what I feel like is the bridge between a lot of these types of things, because it's something that we can do anytime, anywhere. We can take it anywhere with us. We can use it in any circumstances that life kind of presents to us. And then for integration, after birth, it's a really, really hard time. And like your physiology is all over the place. It's like hard enough to manage the hormones without adding other things in. But down the line, I think it can be really powerful for just like the rebirth of the person that you are after birth, because you're never going to be the same. Of course, the time is limited with these talks. I would have loved to do like another 20 minutes on how your brain changes just from pregnancy and birth and as a parent. So there's a lot there. So I think that I don't have like I think it should be this way, but I love talking about that and imagining. So that's what I've got for now. Thanks. That's a great question.
So next question for Luke. So I was wondering, how could we incorporate so the concept of the the subline aesthetic, to me, and I'm sure many people, that's a new concept uh, that I've never heard of before. So it was really interesting hearing your talk about that. I was wondering how could that concept be uh, sort of exemplified or brought forward in a lot of the context of psychedelic use, whether clinical, recreational, and so forth.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that it kind of naturally fits in with this idea of preparation before a psychedelic experience the best. It's a great analogy to sort of say, like, it's one thing to tell people, okay, you're going to experience really complicated emotions, but it's another to sort of display it in this concept and in this framework of saying, look, there's a balance here. There's a duality between this sort of terror and awe. And that plays a really strong role in creating this overarching feeling that is really, really powerful. It's sort of analogizing it to experiencing art in a more easy to understand way than just saying, okay, you're going to experience a wide range of emotions. It's putting some sort of concrete example, even by showing sort of paintings that have been described as sublime historically, that puts an idea in the participant's mind before going into a psychedelic experience and sort of emphasizes the role that the terror plays in conjunction with the all to create something really strong and to explore your own psyche.
Thank you. Andrea, would you like to field a question?
Yeah, we have another question for Cece. So, Cece, it is impressive how you turned your personal experience into something so thoughtful and beautiful. What are your next steps in the field? What do you think that should be done to exploit media to raise awareness about treatment-resistant depression and the benefits of being treated with ketamine?
Thank you so much. That's so nice. Yeah, I think in terms of this project, the next steps with it really is just expanding it out. This was really a proof of concept, right? So it's about 20 minutes. And ideally the music will be an hour and 20 minutes long. So every day is just working on another song for that, another one of Charlie's adventures within that therapy space. And that's really a lot of what my art is about, writing and like musical is about psychedelic experiences that end in a very happy, positive note. One second. She's good now. Yeah, is psychedelic experiences that end that show a journey that is very difficult and very hard and very realistic, but end in a happier, more positive place, because I just don't think there is a ton of media out there right now that does it. And I think what could be done to kind of help navigate that is to just to have happier versions of those stories, more realistic ones. And obviously you don't want to just create a narrative, or media that's all like, oh my god, psychedelic can cure everything, they're amazing, because that's not honest either, 100%. But there's just there's a lot of room, I think, for improvement in the media space to kind of show the benefits that can be had of kind of journeying into your inner mind and undergoing psychedelic experiences under doctor supervisions. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's very important what you said, because there is still lots of stigma against depressive disorders and this modality of treatment. There is still, especially in some countries which are a bit more conservative, and there is still some inequalities in the access, mostly related to financial issues. So I think this type of initiatives, um, your musical and being it lengthy or short, I think it has the potential to raise awareness even for people who are struggling with depressive disorders. It can just be the trigger for them to seek different support from psychiatrists who are more into this type of treatments with ketamine. So I think it's really important. And yeah, I really admire your courage. I think people with living experience, they can offer a different perspective. And yeah, I think everyone felt moved by your courage and your story. So it's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice. Thank you, guys.
All right, I'd like to field a question to Lindsay now. So I was really intrigued in your presentation, particularly when you discussed, for example, not even in just therapy spaces, but even in medical spaces, such as recovering from surgery, and how access to things like a view of nature decreases their stay in the hospital. Like taking all of this together, I think it's really important that we should bring nature and these regenerative settings to spaces like in therapy, particularly psychedelic therapies. How do you envision that people could uh, help advance your your idea? How can we get this idea into the heads of more therapists? Because, like I said, I mean, the stats are there. We just how can we go about doing that? Oh, sorry, you're muted. Wait, you're still muted?
Sorry. Thank you for that. That's a great question. I think first of all, it's. I think one of the participants yesterday also touched upon sort of ideas around the setting, and I thought she did an incredible job of really defining that the setting is a crucial component in the therapy setting. And I think the most interesting part of it for me is that it hasn't actually been, there's a lot of discourse around that the set and setting is so important within the context of psychedelic assisted therapy, but we haven't really done much to define what that actually is in terms of the setting. And obviously the set that can expand to loads of things, cultural conditioning, historical background, everything, all of those things. And I think specifically for me to focus on this like regenerative approach, yeah, some of the original research that was done and biophilic design principles from the 1920s in NHS in the UK basically showed that access to just natural spaces and natural window spaces improved sort of medical outcomes. And that's just I think that's a really easy thing to understand. And I think it probably starts with just that awareness, first of all, that the actual clinical spaces do determine clinical outcomes. And then secondly, from that, I also think I just got told yesterday that they when they're doing a lot of the trials that they can't actually measure they can't actually take people outside by law, at least in the UK, they can't actually do that. So the idea would be that you start to integrate some of those ideas into the actual therapy space just as a sort of condition and then see where we go from there. And I think then you could sort of begin to validate it by a sort of 2 by 2 study to see if that actually does impact the therapeutic outcome. And you can do that without actually changing. You can do that in the context of trials that are already going on anyway. So it's not like you'd have to design a new study in order to sort of understand that. You know, those things could also be put in trials that are already going on anyway. And I think that that's something I don't think it necessarily at this precise moment in time needs to have a whole redesign just to sort of validate that. I think it's just a natural, intuitive thing that access to sort of natural spaces within therapeutic contexts is pretty obvious. Well, for example, in the NHS in the UK, there's a lot of green spaces that are disused. We have like an NHS forestry scheme, and there's a lot of efforts towards sustainability in healthcare, but there's no one that seems to be linking those things up, which I find really interesting. And I'm really interested in how people who've got experience in sort of different areas can sort of work together with people within the psychedelic field or in clinical and therapeutic design and work together in terms of knowledge not being siloed so that it all influences each other.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Basically, foot in the door, get people to know. And I think, in my experience at least, that this happens a lot more than people think. That they're incorporating these items, these concepts into settings without even knowing it. I just recalled a psychedelic study that I was working with that we would have just like fake plants in the corner of the room. You know, it's not a lot. There's no windows to the outside, but I think just something small like that is a gateway to your idea.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's been sort of an evolution when you see the first sort of iterations of the psychedelic therapy room, and like as the sort of fields progress, you can see like slightly over time more and more sort of like nature elements have been brought into the design of that sort of pictures of trees or as you say plants or scents or all of that kind of thing. And I think we can just extend that further. And specifically, I think what I really love about this is the connection to sort of all of the incredible research that's already been done about how psychedelics do facilitate nature connectedness and can facilitate sort of pro-environmental behavior. I do think all of that's sort of interlinked, and that's what regenerative design is. It doesn't separate sort of the idea between human and nature. It doesn't see it as a sort of separation and understands those things as sort of like relational processes, so that things that we're doing to heal ourselves, heal the planet and so on and so forth, then it's sort of an extension of that because we are nature, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Now I'm going to ask a question, and I want to hear answers from everyone. Uh, so what you think of this question? So what I'll ask is, what do you hope for the future of the psychedelic space? What does that space look like? It doesn't have to be within the context of your talk at all. It could just be generally speaking. What do you want to see that space look like? And I'll let anyone who's brave enough to start.
Can I start? Is that okay? I see it decriminalized worldwide. I see it as an open space for all people, regardless of color, a safe space for LGBTQ. I see a positive link between like facilitated folks like have licenses and also respect for people who don't hold licenses, but also practice like traditional and indigenous healers. And I see it respected by people who even are not interested in taking the medicine, but understand the healing capabilities of it. And I also see it destigmatized for recreational use as well. Next person.
I can sort of add on there. I completely agree with the sort of aims that Angel laid out there. And I think something that struck me was last week in Denver at Psychedelic Science. I heard someone sort of talk about the idea of the psychedelic space becoming a bit less substance focused, and leaning a bit away from that idea of psychedelic exceptionalism. That's a bit of a trap. And as well, like away from this idea of we're trying to get our next hit or we're trying to go deeper essentially each and every time, who can take more and stuff like that. But rather that we focus on building community and building rich knowledge from multiple perspectives. And I think today has been like a really important day in terms of adding to psychedelic knowledge by focusing on these non-scientific perspectives, but rather focusing on something that can add to that and create more depth and understanding and sort of share knowledge within the psychedelic space. So I think overall it comes from bringing in more perspectives and truly focusing on the community.
Yeah, I'll go to yeah, I agree with like both of what you guys both said. And I think a big part of it is just like the destigmatization, just like, someone not automatically associating psychedelic assisted therapy with just wanting to do drugs and going crazy, and actually recognizing that that therapy in itself may be more painful than other therapies. Specifically like some pharmaceuticals, like I do think with a lot of psychedelic assisted or psychoactive assisted therapies, there is a lot more inner emotional work and healing that's going on. And so it's a lot to process, and kind of having people recognize that and realize it can be just as beneficial. And also like, I don't know, I feel like right now, even with like alcohol, like, and like drinking, like that kind of culture, like it's very widely accepted in the community and the world that we live in. And I would love to see kind of maybe a swap for like the way that currently psychedelics is perceived, maybe more of a perception like that of drinking, and more like safe psychedelic like use in terms of being under like doctor supervision, everything like that be more widely accepted the same way drinking is, since there's a lot more benefits to be had in a clinical space with psychoactive or psychedelic assisted therapies, just from previous research that exists and continues to come to light. So
Yeah, really, the problem with drinking is it's profitable for countries. That's why it's so promoted and legalized. But yeah, it really has it really it leads to cancer, addiction. It has really devastating effects in public health. It's a public health issue, right? So I don't see why there is still lots of stigma associated with psychedelic substances, even in the clinics. So I think the policies should change. And so even for people who want to consume, for instance, I'm just going to talk about Portugal because that's the reality that I know better. We have specific rooms for people who want to consume illicit substances, and those rooms are in buildings. And there are always healthcare providers and other people who test drugs to reduce the harm. So I know there is a big festival, it's Boom Festival, and they have those teams who do drug testing for psychedelics. So I think, sorry, I think, but besides being legalized, the community should have access to this type of services and care to make their experience more safe, you know.
I can go. I have some thoughts that are a mixture of idealistic and potentially realistic. I think that the growth of the psychedelic space would benefit from it not being driven by the sources of funding that people can get. This is, I think, really devastating because it puts the field in a box where there's only so much we can do. And there's only so many places you can go from being limited in this way. And most people are left out. I think that the walls between that, which is, say, the above ground and the underground, need to be broken down. And I don't have a plan of attack for like what that could look like. This is a little bit idealistic, but I think that would change everything. And like what Angel said, having like the decriminalization being done everywhere, recreation, like what do we need to do to really change how people view psychedelics? They are not like the devil and they're not hurting people. And them being everywhere and available in different spaces that are not just therapeutic could have a really serious impact on how we treat each other and the maybe the forward momentum of our country. I think that it's really important that we have facilitation within communities of people who identify with one another so that the people who are the professionals and the caregivers and offering the more therapeutic or healing spaces, that they actually identify as part of the community of the people that they're serving. So the best example that I have, which is really a big part of what I'm involved in my community, is that in a queer space, you're being able to connect with a facilitator or an organization, and that the people are identifying as queer, and then they're safe and they're insulated in that space. And that's a completely different experience for someone on the outside going into a situation where they do not connect, because so much of this is about connection, whether it's with who you are spiritually, with your experiences, like you're integrating your whole self, your childhood, and all the things, maybe generations before you, that type of healing, or just connecting with someone who gets what your life is like, whether it's easy or extremely difficult and traumatic. So those are my main things. Thanks.
And I think for me, I agree with all of the visions you guys have all set out there, but I think um, what I'd love to see is the inclusion of the knowledge that already exists outside of the scientific communities. People have been using psychedelics in many other contexts for a really long time, and the validity of the knowledge that comes from just people's experience from we already have loads of data of the efficacy and the safety of psychedelics in other contexts outside of clinical trials. So it would be nice to see if some of that could be included as validation of their efficacy and the impact, and also, but I think most importantly, more acknowledgement of Indigenous peoples who've obviously origins and caretakers of these medicines. I'd love to see more of that inclusion in all psychedelic spaces, particularly sort of Western academic conferences and things like that, because we still have a lot to learn in terms of where we go forward with the space.
Yeah, thank you all. A lot of insightful answers. I'm going to have another big question for you all. Um, so what do you think the next steps of your research or your art will be? And if you didn't have any restrictions in terms of costs or any other obstacles, what would you do?
I'll go. Um, yeah, I think I just like keep creating stories, specifically music, specifically musicals, about different psychedelic inspired experiences, and the positive effects of it, and also just like mental health in general too. Um, but pieces of media and art that really uplift, because I think, you go to the movies, you go to see a play, you go to see a musical because you want to escape life for a moment and feel better. And I think as it's your job as like a storyteller to do just that and have, a type of story that ends really positively. And that's kind of my biggest thing with trying to create like artwork, and also like creating art that, talks about obviously psychedelics in a positive light, but just mental health and like the state of the world, like being in a better place at the end of it, is super important and what I want to focus on with art. And then also just the next one will be a musical about mushrooms, is what I will say. So that is also in the works. But yeah, I would just love to see that type of art. And then also just continuing to like present at different places like this, I think is super helpful and beneficial.
Think what I'd sort of love to see happen. I mean, my research was intended to be sort of just a small start that justifies philosophy as a mechanism for looking at the psychedelic experience. And so I'd like to see like a greater interplay and to help facilitate an interplay between researchers that are doing the science aspects and as well philosophers. And I think you can find different ways to integrate philosophy so that the participant feels more supported. I mean, as you see, like CC's whole experience was sort of supported by this idea, by this like spiritual awakening in a way. I mean, obviously that's the title. And that's sort of the philosophy that stuck with her and that was able to support her experience and turn it into a really positive one. And I'd love to see that sort of dynamic be mimicked with other philosophies and other ideas that sort of connect with people through preparation, the experience itself, and integration. And that we can sort of create a language that's philosophical and that can help unpack the experience and tailor it to the person and support them essentially beyond the science.
I think for me personally, this presentation was like a soft launch of my dissertation. The previous study that I conducted before this was trying to examine the strong Black woman schema, and get a better understanding of what the soft girl renaissance would look like. So moving next, I would like to continue to do more research on understanding what the soft girl renaissance would look like. Specifically with psychedelics. And if I had no limits in terms of IRB and like finances, I would put into practice having these healing and liberation circles, training more Black therapists in psychedelic assisted therapy, and giving medicine to women in the community and seeing if it would actually help break down the strong Black woman schema. And then large scale wide, if this was successful, we could do this in other communities that have different presenting problems.
I was also inspired at the Psychedelic Science Conference last week. I saw a talk where was an ethicist and then a religious studies professor comparing a psilocybin or DMT experience with these different religious experiences, and it felt like the missing piece to what I've been working on. And I was very excited and connected with them about basically just bolstering what I have experienced and what I'm saying about the power of meditation as like a scaffolding for the experience in psychedelics, and also how we need that resilience. We need that ability to build our resilience over time so that when we have these like really intense and transformative experiences with psychedelics, that they don't just like slip through our hands. We have a way to hold them and then integrate them over time. And so this piece with the philosophy and the religion was I haven't really like processed how I'm going to use it yet, but I want to dive into that more. And then I actually really liked Luke's talk, and I have some notes about that because one thing that I haven't integrated into when I present like this is how like I mean I talked about fear and birth, but like let me tell you, I mean, fear in psychedelics is very real. Everybody, you know, can resonate to that to some degree who has had a psychedelic experience. And I think that actually that needs to be said more and talked about more because you hear about bad trips. I know when I was in high school, the first thing I ever learned about psychedelics was that this kid who was older did too much acid and like never came back, you know, like psychosis. Like that was terrifying to me because you already feel a little crazy, right? When you're in high school, like, am I okay? But I think talking to people about that and normalizing that is really important. So Luke, I might be reaching out to you because I think that would be really cool to weave into what I'm talking about. And the no cost, you know, my mind is going like to a million places with that. And I'd love to do something macro and have this like big idea, but honestly, I just keep settling on these really small ways of being in a community space and offering education that's real and meaningful and specific to the community and the people that make up a community, because of the stigmatism that we've talked about, or you know, being having psychedelics be so stigmatized that people just dismiss them or they form this opinion of them which makes it very difficult to be curious. And so offering education and helping people get out of like the ruts that they have gotten in or what they've been exposed to as far as what psychedelics are, how they work in our brains, and what they can offer us, I think would be really powerful and would probably take a lot of money, especially if we wanted to like educate a lot of people. And then maybe building on that, having like a community space where there could be more than just education, but there could be like offerings of facilitation or groups and community. And that would be like starting with meditation. And then as things get decriminalized or legalized or these different, you know, I'm in Washington state. So like I'm going to be, I think, one of the next waves of states that get something in place where we see this more widespread. Right now, we just have ketamine. So yeah, that's what I would do. I could go on and on. I mean, how much money are we talking about here? You know? Thanks.
I think for me, very, very simply, I just want to design the setting. That's it. I just want to make it come to life. That's it. Give me the money. I can do all of the stuff. But I'll just have to settle for a few plants for now. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'd love to do that. That if I could actually bring together a group of different people to actually make that setting come to life. And yeah, that would be amazing. But for now, we will just try and read more about it and valid and try and advocate for it. And yeah, that's what I would love.
Yep, maybe some big time funder will watch this and really click with one of your all's ideas. Uh, Andrea?
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's good to see I suppose many of you get to know each other today, and it's good to see your commitment to your projects, but also to cooperate and to get in touch with other participants. So that's really beautiful. I think it's one of the goals of psychedelics, just to create a network. And I really enjoyed listening and learning from all of you. So thank you so much for that.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. You had so many fantastic ideas, great presentations. Um, yeah, I wish the best of luck to everyone in their future endeavors, whether it's continuing their research, branching off into something else, or whatever you might be doing. Um, thank you. And with that, perhaps we can close the Q&A. Does anyone have any final thoughts before? If not, I'm sorry, Angel, you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say thank you for the opportunity. That's all. Thank you.
Yep. All right. And so with that, again, a very huge thank you for everyone. And also, I don't want to forget the audience. Thank the audience. I want to thank the audience for tuning in with us. Uh, an A plus if you were also here yesterday. Uh, but and we hope to see you again here tomorrow. Uh, so thank you for being with us on day 2 of PsychedelX 2025. Oh, I just have to record.